The massive ships appeared in Earth's sky without warning. They were bigger than anything humans had ever built, bigger than their largest cities. The alien vessels hung in the darkness of space like metal mountains, their hulls gleaming with strange lights that pulsed in patterns no human could understand. On the largest ship, High Chancellor Vexithara stood before a great window that showed the small blue planet below. Her four arms moved gracefully as she adjusted the controls of her viewing device. Her purple skin shimmered in the artificial light, and her three eyes studied the world with the confidence of someone who had conquered dozens of planets before. "Another primitive world," she said to her advisors. "Their technology is laughable. They use chemical rockets and metal bullets. This will be simple." The other aliens in the room nodded in agreement. There was Commander Zekt, whose insect-like features clicked as he spoke. "Our scans show no energy shields around their planet, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light ships in their system." "They do have nuclear weapons," added Science Officer Thyron, her tentacles wrapping around her data pad. "But only enough to destroy themselves, nothing that could threaten our fleet." Chancellor Vexithara smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Send the standard message. Tell them to prepare for our arrival. We will give them the usual choice." The message was sent across all of Earth's communication channels. It appeared on every television, every radio, every computer screen. The voice that spoke was cold and mechanical, translated into every human language. "People of Earth, we are the NIGMA Empire. We rule over 300 worlds across this galaxy. You will surrender your planet to our control. You will provide us with resources and workers. You will accept your place as citizens of our empire. You have 72 hours to respond." The message ended with images of other worlds that had refused to surrender. Cities turned to glass, oceans boiled away. Entire species wiped from existence. On Earth, people gathered around their screens in fear and confusion. Governments held emergency meetings. Military leaders studied the alien ships through telescopes and satellites. Everyone waited to see what their leaders would do. But Earth's response was not what anyone expected. A single small ship left Earth's surface and flew toward the alien fleet. It was tiny compared to the massive NIGMA vessels, like a bird flying toward a mountain. The ship requested permission to dock with the flagship. Chancellor Vexithara laughed when she heard the request. "They send one little ship? Do they think we will be impressed by their courage?" "Perhaps they wish to surrender immediately," suggested Commander Zekt. "Some species realize quickly that resistance is hopeless." "Let them come," the Chancellor decided. "It will be amusing to see how these humans beg for mercy." The small Earth ship was allowed to dock. From it stepped a single human wearing a simple black suit. He was middle-aged with graying hair and calm eyes. He carried nothing but a small briefcase. Two NIGMA guards, each twice the human size, escorted him through the ship's corridors. The walls were covered in images of conquered worlds and defeated armies. The message was clear. This is what happened to those who opposed the NIGMA Empire. The human showed no fear as he walked. He looked around with interest, as if he was taking a tour of a museum. When the guards tried to hurry him along, he politely asked them to slow down so he could see more. Finally, they reached the main chamber where Chancellor Vexithara waited. The room was huge, designed to make visitors feel small and powerless. The Chancellor sat on a throne-like chair that hovered above the floor. Around her stood dozens of her most important officers and advisors. "I am Ambassador Chen Wei," the human said with a slight bow. "I represent the people of Earth." Chancellor Vexithara studied him for a long moment. "You seem very calm for someone whose world is about to be conquered." "That depends," Chen replied, "on who is doing the conquering." The aliens in the room made sounds of amusement. They had heard such brave words before, usually just before the speaker broke down and begged for mercy. You received our message, the Chancellor said. You know what we offer? Surrender now, and your people will be treated well. Resist, and your world will burn. Chen opened his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I have a different proposal, he said. The Chancellor leaned forward with interest. Oh? And what could a primitive species like yours possibly offer us? Chen looked up at her with those same calm eyes. Leave our system now, and we'll pretend this never happened. This is your only warning. The silence in the room lasted for exactly 3 seconds. Then every alien in the chamber began to laugh. Some fell over from laughing so hard. Others had to lean on each other for support. The sound echoed off the walls like thunder. Chancellor Vexithara laughed harder than anyone. Tears ran down her purple cheeks. A warning? She gasped between laughs. You give us a warning? Your ships have no shields, Commander Zecht said, still chuckling. Your weapons are centuries behind ours. Your entire planet has no defense against our fleet. We have studied your species, added Science Officer Theron. You still fight wars with metal bullets and explosive chemicals. You have never even left your own solar system. Chen waited patiently for the laughter to stop. When the room finally grew quiet, he spoke again. I understand this seems amusing to you, but I am required to give you this warning. Required by whom? The Chancellor asked. Your government? Your military? By simple courtesy, Chen said. We believe in giving people a chance to make the right choice. Chancellor Vexithara wiped the tears from her eyes. Very well, human. We have heard your amusing warning. Now hear ours. You have 72 hours to surrender your planet. After that, we will take it by force. Chen nodded and closed his briefcase, but before he turned to leave, he pulled out a small data device and placed it on the floor. What is that? Commander Zecht demanded. Information, Chen said. When you're ready to listen, activate the device. It contains coordinates and a simple message. What message? The Chancellor asked. Chen looked at her one more time. His expression was sad, like someone who had tried to help a friend but had been refused. The same message I just gave you. Leave our system now, and we'll pretend this never happened. The guards escorted Chen back to his ship. As he walked through the corridors, he again looked around with interest. He seemed to be memorizing every detail, every corner, every door. When his ship was gone, Chancellor Vexithara picked up the data device. Should we examine it? Asked Science Officer Theron. Later, the Chancellor said. First, let us enjoy the next 72 hours. It's not often we meet a species this entertaining. She looked out the window at Earth again. The small blue planet spun slowly in the darkness, looking peaceful and helpless. Soon, it would belong to the NIGMA Empire, like all the others. But, as she watched, Chancellor Vexithara felt something strange. For just a moment, she wondered why the human had seemed so confident. Why had he shown no fear? Why had he talked as if Earth held all the power? She pushed the thoughts away. She had conquered too many worlds to doubt herself now. In 72 hours, she would have her answer. The warning had been given. Now time would tell if anyone had been wise enough to listen. 72 hours passed. Earth gave no response to the NIGMA Empire's demands. No message of surrender came from the planet. No desperate pleas for mercy. No chaotic evacuations. The humans simply continued their daily lives as if the massive alien fleet above them did not exist. Chancellor Vexithara watched the planet through her viewing screens with growing confusion. They must know we are here, she said to her officers. Our ships block out their sun in some places. Perhaps they are paralyzed with fear, suggested Commander Zecht. Some species freeze when faced with overwhelming power. But the evidence showed otherwise. Earth's communication networks continued to function normally. People went to work, children went to school, and traffic moved through the cities just like any other day. The only difference was that more humans seemed to be looking up at the sky and pointing. They are pointing at us, Science Officer Theron reported. But they do not seem afraid. Some of them appear to be taking pictures. This behavior was unlike anything the NIGMA Empire had encountered before. Usually, when their fleet arrived at a world, panic spread like fire. Governments fell apart, armies scattered, and civilians fled to the countryside. But Earth seemed to be treating the invasion like a tourist attraction. Begin demonstration attacks, Chancellor Vexithara ordered. Destroy some of their satellites and military bases. Show them what happens to those who ignore the NIGMA Empire. The first attack came at dawn. NIGMA ships fired precise energy beams that turned 3 military satellites into clouds of sparkling dust. The aliens expected immediate panic, desperate communications, and frantic attempts to contact them. Instead, Earth's response was to launch new satellites within 6 hours. The replacement satellites were more advanced than the ones that had been destroyed. They had better armor and more powerful transmitters. How did they build those so quickly? Commander Zecht asked, studying the scans of the new satellites. Perhaps they had them ready, Theron suggested. But our intelligence showed no evidence of such preparation. Chancellor Vexithara ordered more attacks. NIGMA forces destroyed a military base in a remote desert, turning the buildings into melted metal and glass. They vaporized an empty research station in Antarctica. They sank 3 unmanned naval vessels in international waters. Each attack was carefully planned to avoid civilian casualties while demonstrating NIGMA power. The aliens had learned that destroying cities right away often led to desperate final attacks from the planet's defenders. It was better to start small and build up the pressure. But Earth's reactions continued to confuse them. After each attack, human news broadcasts discussed the events with remarkable calmness. Military experts analyzed the alien weapons and made notes about their capabilities. Scientists studied the energy signatures and wrote papers about the technology. "They are studying us," Theron reported with disbelief. "Instead of being afraid, they are learning from our attacks." "Impossible," the Chancellor said. "No species could be so calm when facing annihilation." 3 days after the deadline had passed, Earth finally sent a response. But it was not what anyone expected. A different human ship approached the NIGMA fleet. This one was even smaller than Ambassador Chen's vessel. From it stepped a woman with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. She wore a white coat over simple clothes and carried a tablet computer. "I am Dr. Sarah Martinez," she announced when she was brought before Chancellor Vexithara. "I am Earth specialist in alien biology and psychology." The Chancellor leaned forward with interest. "You study alien biology? But we are your first contact with life beyond your world." Dr. Martinez smiled politely. "That's not exactly accurate. But we can discuss that later. I'm here to deliver another warning." The aliens in the room began to mutter angrily. "Another warning? After the NIGMA Empire had demonstrated their power? Your time for warnings has passed," Commander Zecht growled. "You have seen what our weapons can do." "Yes," Dr. Martinez agreed, making notes on her tablet. "Energy beams with a yield of approximately 50 terawatts, delivered through focused plasma streams. Quite impressive technology, though not as advanced as some others we've observed." The room fell silent. How could this human know such specific details about their weapons? Dr. Martinez continued making notes as she spoke. "Chancellor Vexithara, born on the world Kethrix Prime, ruling the NIGMA Empire for 27 Earth years. You have conquered 43 worlds personally. You prefer to use fear rather than direct violence when possible." The Chancellor's 3 eyes widened in shock. "How do you know this?" "Commander Zecht," the doctor continued, turning to the insect-like alien, former nest warrior from the hive clusters. "You joined the NIGMA Empire after your world was conquered 15 years ago. You have a genetic condition that makes your left antenna shorter than your right one." Zecht's claws clicked nervously. "This is impossible," That information is not in any database you could access. Dr. Martinez turned to Science Officer Thyron. And you have a very interesting physiology. Your tentacles can taste chemical compositions. Through touch. You use this ability to analyze materials, but you also have a preference for the mineral content found in the oceans of your home world. Thyron's tentacles writhed in distress. How could you possibly know about my sensory abilities? Even my own people barely understand them. Dr. Martinez looked up from her tablet. Earth has been studying the NIGMA Empire for quite some time. We know a great deal about your species, your technology, and your methods. Studying us? Chancellor Vexithara stood up from her throne. From where? You have never left your solar system. Again, that's not exactly accurate, the doctor said calmly. But the important point is this. Earth's patience is not infinite. We suggest you withdraw your fleet while terms can still be negotiated. Commander Zecht drew his weapon, a wicked-looking energy blade. Enough of this nonsense. How do you know these things about us? Dr. Martinez looked at the weapon with professional interest. Ionized metal edge, held in shape by a magnetic field generator. The power source is probably in your armor's back unit. The blade would cut through most materials but would be useless against properly designed energy shields. She made another note on her tablet. Your aggressive response to stress is typical of your species. Kethric's warriors also show similar patterns when facing the unknown. Chancellor Vexithara felt something she had not experienced in years. Fear. Not fear of death in battle, but the deeper fear of facing something beyond her understanding. What are you? She whispered. Dr. Martinez closed her tablet and looked at the Chancellor with something that might have been pity. We are humans, and we are trying to avoid a war that none of us want. She turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Chancellor, that data device Ambassador Chen left for you contains coordinates for 73 worlds throughout your empire. You might want to check on them. As Dr. Martinez was escorted back to her ship, Chancellor Vexithara grabbed the data device from her desk. Her hands shook as she activated it. Coordinates appeared on the screen, dozens of them scattered throughout NIGMA space. Coordinates for military bases, research stations, and command centers. Coordinates for worlds that were supposed to be secret. Coordinates for places that did not appear on any map the humans should have been able to access. And with each set of coordinates was a timestamp, showing when humans had been there to record the location. Some of the timestamps were recent. Others were years old. The oldest was dated more than 50 years ago. Chancellor Vexithara stared at the data in growing horror. For 50 years, humans had been moving through NIGMA space without being detected. They had been watching, learning, and preparing. The warning had been real. Earth truly could pretend this had never happened. But that meant they could also do much more than pretend. Commander Zecht, she said quietly, send a message to all our worlds. Tell them to check their security. Tell them to look for anything unusual. What kind of unusual things? Zecht asked. Chancellor Vexithara looked out at the small blue planet that had seemed so helpless just days ago. Tell them to look for humans. Chancellor Vexithara had lost patience with warnings and mysteries. 5 days had passed since the deadline, and Earth continued to ignore their demands. The small planet spun peacefully below, showing no signs of fear or preparation for war. It was time to end this strange game. Prepare for planetary assault, she commanded from her throne. Target their major cities. Show them the price of defying the NIGMA Empire. Commander Zecht's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. Finally, which cities should we strike first? All of them, the Chancellor replied. Simultaneous strikes on their 10 largest population centers. Leave enough survivors to work in the mines, but make sure they understand their place. The NIGMA fleet moved into Earth's atmosphere like a storm of metal and death. 200 ships descended through the clouds, their weapons charging with deadly energy. The largest vessels positioned themselves over New York, London, Tokyo, and other major cities. Smaller ships spread out to cover secondary targets. On the ground, humans stopped their daily activities to watch the ships arrive. But instead of panicking or running, many of them seemed to be waiting for something. Children pointed at the ships with excitement. Adults checked their watches and nodded to each other. "Their behavior is still strange," Science Officer Theron reported from her scanning station. "They show no signs of mass panic or evacuation attempts." "It doesn't matter," Chancellor Vexithara said. "In 5 minutes, they will understand that their calm was misplaced." The countdown began. NIGMA weapons powered up with a sound like rolling thunder. Energy signatures spiked as plasma cannons prepared to fire. The ships hung in the sky like angels of death, ready to deliver judgment. On the world below, "Fire in 10 seconds, Commander Zecht announced. 5, 4, 3, 2. At that exact moment, the impossible happened. Space around every major NIGMA world erupted with new starships. Not NIGMA ships, but vessels of unknown design that appeared without warning in the heart of the Empire. They materialized from nowhere, as if they had been invisible until that moment. The timing was perfect. As NIGMA forces prepared to attack Earth, human fleets struck at the Empire's most critical locations. Military bases that had stood for centuries vanished in brilliant explosions. Command centers that controlled entire sectors went dark. Research stations containing the Empire's most advanced technology became clouds of glowing debris. On the NIGMA flagship above Earth, alarms began screaming. Emergency messages flooded the communication channels as reports came in from across the Empire. "Kethrix Prime is under attack," shouted the communications officer. "Unknown vessels are destroying the orbital defense platforms." The Xylon research. "Station has gone dark," called another. "No response from the command staff. Central Command on Thylex 7 reports massive explosions in the military district." Chancellor Vexithara stood frozen as the reports continued. How was this possible? The human fleet was supposed to be primitive. Earth was supposed to be defenseless. "Where did these ships come from?" she demanded. Science Officer Theron's tentacles moved frantically over her controls. "I don't know. They appeared on our sensors at the exact same time across dozens of systems. It's as if they were already in position and simply uncloaked." More reports flooded in. Every major NIGMA military installation was under attack. The enemy ships moved with perfect coordination, striking strategic targets with surgical precision. They avoided civilian areas but destroyed anything of military value with ruthless efficiency. "Admiral Krell's Third Fleet has been destroyed," another officer reported. 17 ships lost in less than 10 minutes. "The weapons research facility on Nexus Prime is gone," called out the communications officer. "They're reporting total destruction of the experimental plasma cannon project." Chancellor Vexithara felt her world spinning out of control. In less than 20 minutes, the NIGMA Empire was losing military assets that had taken decades to build. And the attacks were being carried out by ships that shouldn't exist. "Show me these vessels," she commanded. The main screen filled with images from across the Empire. The human ships were unlike anything in NIGMA databases. They were sleek and angular with a dark metal that seemed to absorb light. They moved through space with fluid grace, dancing around NIGMA weapons fire as if they knew exactly where each shot would be aimed. "Their technology is far beyond our estimates," Theron said quietly. "Those ships are using energy sources we can't identify. Their weapons output readings are impossible." "Impossible or not, they're destroying our empire," Zecht growled. "How many ships do they have?" The answer came from multiple sources as reports continued to stream in. The humans had hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. They were attacking simultaneously across a front that spanned the entire NIGMA Empire. No force in galactic history had ever shown such reach and coordination. But the most disturbing aspect wasn't the size of the human fleet. It was their knowledge. The attacking ships knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage. They targeted weak points in NIGMA defenses that were supposed to be secret. They destroyed facilities whose locations weren't even in the official records. They know everything about us, Theron whispered. Every base, every weapons depot, every command center, they have maps of our entire empire. On the screen, the human ships continued their devastating assault. NIGMA forces tried to respond, but their communications networks were being systematically destroyed. Commanders couldn't coordinate with their fleets. Fleets couldn't communicate with their support bases. The Empire's vast military machine was being torn apart piece by piece. "Sir," the communications officer said urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." "Put it through," the Chancellor ordered. Ambassador Chen's calm face appeared on the screen. He was standing in what looked like a military command center with dozens of humans working at computer stations behind him. "Chancellor Vexithera," he said politely, "I see you've chosen not to accept our warning." "You," she snarled, "what have you done to our empire?" "We've done exactly what we told you we would do," Chen replied. "We warned you to leave our system. You chose not to listen. Your planet has no fleet," Commander Zecht shouted. "We scanned your entire system." Chen smiled sadly. "You scanned our solar system. You never scanned the rest of the galaxy." The truth hit Chancellor Vexithara like a physical blow. The humans hadn't built a defensive fleet around Earth. They had built an offensive fleet scattered throughout NIGMA space. For years, maybe decades, human ships had been hiding in the dark between the stars, waiting for this moment. "This is impossible," she said. "Your species has never left its home system." "That's what we wanted you to believe," Chen said. "It's much easier to study someone when they don't know you're watching them." On the tactical display, more NIGMA positions went dark. The humans were methodically dismantling 3 centuries of imperial expansion in a single day. "You're destroying everything we've built," Vexithera said. "We're destroying your military capabilities," Chen corrected. "We haven't touched your civilian populations or non-military infrastructure. We don't make war on innocents." "What do you want?" the Chancellor asked desperately. "Tribute? Territory? Resources?" Chen's expression grew even sadder. "We wanted to be left alone. That's all we ever wanted. We tried to warn you." The human ships continued their assault with mechanical precision. Each target was struck once and then ignored, allowing any survivors to evacuate. The humans weren't interested in causing unnecessary destruction. They were simply removing the NIGMA Empire's ability to threaten anyone ever again. "How long have you been watching us?" Theron asked quietly. "Long enough," Chen replied. "Long enough to learn your language, your customs, your technology. Long enough to map every world you control and every ship you've built. Long enough to understand that this day would eventually come." Chancellor Vexithara realized that the NIGMA Empire had never been as powerful as they believed. While they had been conquering primitive worlds and feeling superior, the humans had been watching from the shadows, learning and preparing. "The data device you left," she said. "Those coordinates were just a small sample," Chen confirmed. "We've been to every world in your empire. We know the location of every military base, every research station, every strategic resource. We've been preparing for this conversation for 50 years. The Chancellor looked around her bridge, seeing the fear in her officer's eyes. The great NIGMA Empire, conqueror of hundreds of worlds, had been outmatched by a species they had dismissed as primitive. "What happens now?" she asked. Chen Wei looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Now, Chancellor, you listen to our terms." In the emergency command center deep within the NIGMA flagship, Chancellor Vexithara demanded answers. The Empire's military leaders had gathered for what might be their final meeting. Reports continued to stream in from across their territory, each one worse than the last. "How did this happen?" she asked her intelligence chief, a tall being with gray skin and multiple sensory organs. "How did a primitive species achieve this level of strategic superiority?" Intelligence Director Zalon's organs twitched nervously. We are still analyzing the data, Chancellor. But preliminary reports suggest the humans have been spacefaring far longer than they admitted. How much longer? Commander Zek demanded. Zalon consulted his datapad with trembling hands. Based on captured human equipment and intercepted communications, we estimate they have been exploring beyond their solar system for at least 80 years. The room fell silent. 80 years. That meant humans had been traveling through space since before many of the current NIGMA officers had been born, but our scans of their system showed only primitive technology, Science Officer Thyron protested. Chemical rockets and basic satellites. It appears, Zalon said slowly. That was exactly what they wanted us to see. He activated a holographic display that showed Earth's solar system. Look more carefully at these scans. We detected what we thought were asteroids in the outer system. Natural debris orbiting their star. The image zoomed in on several dark objects drifting beyond Earth's moon. Computer analysis now suggests these asteroids have artificial structures inside them. They were hidden shipyards and launch facilities. Chancellor Vexithera stared at the display in growing horror. The humans had been building a secret fleet right under their sensors, disguised as space rocks and orbital debris. We found evidence of more deception, Zalon continued. Their primitive satellites were actually monitoring stations. They were tracking our fleet movements from the moment we entered their system. And their radio transmissions, Theron added, studying her own scans. We thought they were just normal planetary communications, but hidden in the signals were encrypted messages coordinating with their ships throughout our empire. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, and the picture they formed was terrifying. While the NIGMA Empire had been expanding through conquest and subjugation, humans had been quietly spreading through the galaxy like a shadow. They had watched, learned, and prepared for this exact scenario. Director Zalon, the Chancellor said, quietly, show me everything we know about human activities in our space. The holographic display expanded to show the entire NIGMA Empire. Red dots began appearing on the map, each one representing a human presence that had been detected or suspected. The dots spread across hundreds of star systems, reaching into every corner of NIGMA territory. These are confirmed human observation posts, Zalon explained. Hidden bases on asteroids, small moons, and in deep space. Most of them have been there for decades. More dots appeared in different colors. These are systems where we've detected human technology after the fact. Monitoring devices left behind after visits, data collection equipment, stealth satellites. The map was covered in colored dots. There was no region of NIGMA space that humans hadn't visited. They turned our entire empire into their research laboratory, Zek said with disbelief. It gets worse, Zalon said grimly. We intercepted some human communications during their attack. They weren't just observing our military forces. They were studying us. He brought up a new display showing biological data, psychological profiles, and cultural analysis. They have detailed information about every species in our empire, our biology, our psychology, our social structures. They know us better than we know ourselves. Chancellor Vexithera looked at her own profile on the screen. The humans had documented her rise to power, her military strategies, even her personal preferences and psychological weaknesses. It was like looking at herself through the eyes of a scientist studying a laboratory animal. Dr. Martinez, Theron whispered. She knew things about us that should have been impossible. Our physiology, our personal histories, our genetic conditions, because they've been watching us our entire lives, the Chancellor realized. Every public appearance, every battle, every decision we've made, they were there, invisible in the darkness, taking notes. The revelation was crushing. The NIGMA Empire had never been as powerful or as secret as they believed. Every military operation, every conquest, every strategic decision had been observed and recorded by human agents. They had been playing a game where their opponent knew all their moves in advance. There's more, Zalon said reluctantly. We found evidence that we weren't their first contact with galactic civilization. What do you mean? Vexathera asked. Before they encountered us, the humans had already made contact with at least 12 other spacefaring species. They studied each one, learned their languages, understood their cultures. We were simply the first to threaten Earth directly. The Chancellor felt dizzy. Everything she thought she knew about human capabilities had been wrong. They weren't a young species, taking their first steps into space. They were experienced galactic travelers who had been exploring and learning for generations. The species they contacted before us, she asked. What happened to them? Zalan checked his files. According to the data we recovered, they established peaceful trade relationships with most of them. Several species are now working in partnership with human explorers and scientists, but they never revealed themselves openly. No. They preferred to remain in the background, observing and learning. It appears their policy was to only reveal their true capabilities when directly threatened. Commander Zekt's claws clicked anxiously. So we forced them to show their hand. More than that, Thyron said, studying the tactical reports. Their attack on our empire isn't random destruction. They're targeting specific systems and technologies. She brought up an analysis of the human assault. Look at what they're destroying. Weapons research facilities, military command centers, propaganda networks. But they're leaving civilian infrastructure intact. They're not trying to conquer us, the Chancellor realized. They're trying to disarm us. And reform us, Zalan added. Intelligence suggests they want to restructure the empire, not destroy it. The more they learned, the more disturbing the picture became. The humans hadn't just prepared for war with the NIGMA Empire. They had prepared for peace afterward. They had plans for rebuilding, for restructuring, for creating something new from the ashes of the old empire. Their warning? Vexathara said, slowly. When Ambassador Chen said they could pretend this never happened. He meant it literally, Zalan confirmed. They could have eliminated our empire at any time over the past 50 years. They chose diplomacy first, not from weakness, but from a moral framework that valued life. The Chancellor looked around the room at her defeated officers. They were trying to save us from ourselves. And we laughed at them, Zekt said bitterly, on the main screen. Reports continued to come in from across the empire, but the pattern was becoming clear. The humans weren't interested in revenge or domination. They were systematically removing the NIGMA Empire's ability to threaten other species while preserving everything that could be rebuilt into something better. Chancellor, the communications officer called out, we're receiving another transmission from Earth. Put it through, she said wearily. Ambassador Chen appeared on the screen again. Behind him, the human command center was busy but calm. Officers moved with quiet efficiency, coordinating operations across the galaxy. Chancellor Vexathara, Chen said politely, are you ready to discuss terms? She looked at the man who had tried to warn her just days ago. He had known exactly what would happen if she refused his offer. He had given her every chance to avoid this outcome. Ambassador Chen, she said quietly, I believe I am finally ready to listen. Chen nodded with what might have been relief. Then let us talk about the future, not just for your empire, but for all the species of this galaxy. For the first time since the attacks began, Chancellor Vexathara felt something other than fear and anger. She felt something that might have been hope. 3 weeks had passed since the human assault on the NIGMA Empire began. The once mighty fleet that had threatened Earth now drifted powerless in orbit around the small blue planet. Their weapons were offline, their engines disabled, and their communication systems limited to a single channel that connected directly to Earth's command center. Chancellor Vexathara stood in her private quarters, looking out at the planet below. It seemed impossible that such a peaceful-looking world could have orchestrated the downfall of her empire, but the evidence was undeniable. Human ships continued to patrol NIGMA space, ensuring that the ceasefire held while negotiations continued. A soft sound at her door announced a visitor. She turned to see Ambassador Chen Wei entering her quarters, carrying the same simple briefcase he had brought during their first meeting. But now she understood that the unassuming human was probably one of the most powerful people in the galaxy. "Ambassador," she said, with a respectful nod, "I assume you've come with the final terms?" Chen moved to the window and looked out at Earth. "I've come to discuss the future, Chancellor. Not just your future, but the future of every species in this part of the galaxy." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. "The Soul Accords," he said, placing it on her desk. "A new treaty that will govern relations between all spacefaring civilizations in this region." Vexathara approached the document carefully. "And if we refuse to sign?" "Then you remain prisoners on your ships until you change your minds," Chen said simply. "But I don't think you'll refuse. You're too intelligent not to see the benefits." She picked up the document and began reading. The terms were unlike anything she had expected. Instead of demanding tribute or territory, the humans were proposing a complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The NIGMA Empire would become a voluntary confederation, she read aloud. Member species retain full autonomy over their internal affairs. No species may be forced to join or remain in the Confederation against their will. "The age of conquest is over," Chen explained. "We're proposing something that has never existed before. A truly cooperative galactic community," Vexathara continued reading. "Earth will serve as the mediating authority for disputes between species. Human forces will guarantee the protection of any species that requests it." "We don't want to rule," Chen said. "We want to protect. There's a difference." The Chancellor found herself nodding as she read further. The treaty outlined systems for trade, scientific cooperation, and cultural exchange. It established protocols for first contact with new species and guidelines for interstellar law. "What about our military forces?" she asked. "The ships and soldiers that survived your attacks?" "They'll have a new purpose," Chen replied. "Exploration instead of conquest, research instead of destruction, protection instead of oppression." Move to another section of the document. "We've identified 17 unexplored regions of space that could contain intelligent life. We propose joint missions to make peaceful contact with any species we find." Vexathara set down the treaty and looked at Chen with curiosity. "Why are you offering us this chance?" "We came to destroy your world." Chen was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because we've been watching your empire for 50 years, Chancellor. We've seen the good as well as the bad." He gestured toward the document. "Your scientists have made remarkable discoveries. Your engineers have built incredible technologies. Your doctors have saved millions of lives. The problem was never your people's abilities. It was the system that directed those abilities toward conquest. You want to change the system," she realized. "We want to help you change it," Chen corrected, "into something better. Something that serves all species instead of just the strongest." A soft chime announced another visitor. Commander Zecht entered the room, followed by Science Officer Theron. Both looked tired but curious. "Ambassador," Zecht said with a slight bow. "We've been reviewing the technical specifications you provided. Your offer to share human technology with all member species is genuine," Chen confirmed. "Faster-than-light communication, advanced medical techniques, energy sources that don't pollute worlds. Everything we've learned over the past century will be available to everyone." Thyron's tentacles quivered with excitement. "The applications for research would be incredible. We could explore the galaxy's mysteries together instead of fighting over territory." Chen smiled. "That's exactly what we hoped you would say." Over the next hour, they discussed the details of the treaty. Human administrators would help restructure the former NIGMA worlds, but local governments would remain in control. Species that wanted to leave the Confederation could do so freely. Military forces would be retrained for exploration and peacekeeping rather than conquest. "There is one thing I don't understand," Vexithara said finally. "You could have simply destroyed us. Why go to all this trouble to reform us instead?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Because destruction is easy, Chancellor. Any species with enough weapons can destroy. But creation, cooperation, building something better than what came before, that requires wisdom." He looked out at Earth again. "We spent most of our own history fighting among ourselves. Wars, conquest, empires rising and falling. We nearly destroyed our own world several times before we learned to work together. And now you want to help us learn the same lesson," Theron said. "We want to help everyone learn it," Chen replied. "The galaxy is vast and full of wonders. There's room for all of us if we're wise enough to share it." Commander Zecht clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "The beings we conquered, they would be free under this new system." "Completely free," Chen confirmed. "Some may choose to remain in the Confederation, others may prefer independence. That will be their choice to make." Vexithara found herself thinking about the worlds her forces had conquered over the years. She had told herself it was necessary, that the strong had a right to rule the weak. But now she wondered how many potential friends and allies she had turned into enemies through force. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "I have a question about enforcement." "What happens if a species violates the treaty? What if they return to conquest?" Chen's expression grew serious. "Then they discover that human patience, while extensive, is not infinite. We prefer cooperation, but we are prepared for other options, if necessary." The threat was delivered so calmly that it took a moment to register. But when it did, Vexithara felt a chill. She had seen what human other options looked like. The NIGMA Empire's military had been dismantled in a single day by an enemy they hadn't even known existed. "I understand," she said. Chen's expression softened again. "But we don't expect that to be necessary. Most species, when given the choice between cooperation and conflict, choose cooperation. It's usually more profitable and definitely safer." They spent another hour working through the final details. When they were finished, Chen stood and closed his briefcase. "The document needs to be signed by representatives of all member species," he said. "We've scheduled a ceremony on Earth in 2 weeks. Leaders from across the galaxy will attend." Vexithara looked at the treaty one more time. "And this will really work? Species that have been enemies for centuries will suddenly start cooperating?" "Not suddenly," Chen admitted. "It will take time, patience, and a lot of hard work. But yes, we believe it will work. We've seen it happen before." "Where?" Zecht asked. Chen smiled. "On Earth. 500 different tribes and nations, all convinced they were superior to everyone else. Now they work together to explore the stars." As the humans prepared to leave, Vexithara found herself thinking about the future. For the first time in years, she was looking forward to what came next instead of dreading it. "Ambassador," she called, out as Chen reached the door. "The warning you gave us at the beginning, you really would have preferred to avoid all this?" Chen paused in the doorway. "Chancellor, we spent 50 years hoping we would never have this conversation. We prepared for war, but we prayed for peace." He looked back at her with those same calm eyes she remembered from their first meeting. "The warning was genuine. We wanted to pretend this never happened. We wanted to remain in the shadows and let you continue your expansion as long as you left us alone. But we didn't leave you alone," she said. "No, and so here we are, building something new from the ashes of something old." 2 weeks later, representatives from over 200 species gathered on Earth for the signing of the Sol Accords. The ceremony took place in a great hall that had been built specifically for the occasion, with seating and environmental controls. adapted for dozens of different biologies. Chancellor Vexathara, now holding the title of Senior Advisor for Galactic Cooperation, watched as species that had been enemies for generations sat side by side. The former victims of NIGMA conquest sat with their former oppressors, all working toward a common future. When it was her turn to sign the treaty, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The NIGMA Empire was gone, but something better had taken its place. Something that honored the dignity of all intelligent life. As she wrote her name on the document, she realized that the humans had done more than defeat her empire. They had shown her what her empire could have been if it had been built on cooperation instead of